Hi students, this guide has been designed to be a self-paced guide but needs to be complete within the first 6 weeks of class. I've broken the guide into 6 distinct chunks so that you can pace yourself accordingly. If you collect the various documents that are mentioned in this guide as you work your way through the weeks, you'll be pacing yourself and you'll find that the actual process of putting the plan together is a lot less daunting. This week is an overview of what to expect when you create a strategic plan. Here's a breakdown of the sessions for the Strategic Planning Guide and how to pace yourself. This week, we begin with planning. A good question to ask is, why plan? Planning is a way we can control the direction of our school library program. Planning is a process having to do with determining where you want to go, where you are now, and ways to get from here to there. You don't want your program to be going down the path to failure as depicted on this slide, but rather by effective planning, you can make decisions about key components of your practice. Planning helps you articulate your vision through goals and objectives. Planning is a process that can be shared and communicated so that you're not doing it alone. It gives colleagues a chance to have a sense of ownership in your enterprise. It fosters communication and helps to build networks of people and ideas. This is a model for strategic planning that gives you the big picture. As you can see, it's cyclical. To prepare, you need to identify where we are now, and then determine what are your values, behaviors, philosophy. Looking at school culture, organizational structures, and management styles all play into these very important questions. It's an iterative, cyclical process. This is a slide that shows what your process will look like for this particular class. Red is what you'll do during assignment 1, green is what you'll do during assignment 2, and the blue is what you would do if you were in a permanent job to complete the cycle. For this course, you will not be doing part C of the cycle, which is indicated in blue, but I wanted to give you a sense of the whole process. Strategic planning is a tool of evidence-based practice. It helps us gather data to determine where we are, which is called the strategic plan. The action plan articulates where we want to go. It's comprised of the vision and the mission statement, goals and objectives, and how we're going to get there. For your project, you'll be doing both a strategic and an action plan. For the strategic plan, you'll be determining the demographics and relevant data about the community in which you're doing your fieldwork. Your needs assessment determines the current status of the school library you're studying. As a result of the needs assessment, you will develop vision and mission statements for the library and a long-range plan containing goals and objectives for 3 years. The action plan will make recommendations based on what you've learned for actions to be taken over a 3-year period with timeframes and measures to determine progress. In real life, you'd form an advisory committee of stakeholders from school and local community as part of your planning process. You'd also seek the approval of the Board of Education. You would have a design and evaluation scheme for your plan and an upgrade of the action plan at the end of each year of operation. We will not do the final parts, but we will be using a planning process that's situated in a big picture. To begin, we have to understand the context of the school library. What is the community and the school in which it is situated like? What is their culture and history? What are the characteristics in terms of demographics and size? What types of organization or management do they use? What is the work culture like? What are the missions, goals, and objectives of the communities and schools? What are their values? How do they organize work? How do the managers manage? How do they think of and treat the workers? How do the workers perceive the managers? What do we need to know about this community, school, and library to make decisions about organizing its work? As with any journey, You'll need to plan for your adventure. What will you need? What route will you take? What problems might you encounter? How can you plan to deal with them? If you were in an actual job situation, you'd need to do the following as prerequisites for launching a strategic plan. You'd need to get approval to do it, form a committee, set tasks and guidelines, establish a timeline, develop a communication strategy. For this course, you do not need to do all of these steps, but you do need to do two very important things. You need to choose a library and a librarian with whom you will work. The librarian will advise you on whether any approval is needed and can guide you through the process. Another important part of your planning is the question, who leads? For this process, the answer is you in consultation with the librarian. You are the consultant or expert, and you must have good communication with the person you're working with. You will also need to work with the library media coordinator, if there is one, the district library media specialist, again, if there is one, the assistant principal or principal, the curriculum coordinator, or the administrator to whom the librarian reports. You may need to interview, get documents. It's important to identify the people that you're going to be working with early. Please also consider me as an advisor. I'm happy to help you through the process, and I'm happy to be a resource for you. For this course, also, you do not have the luxury of choosing a favorable time frame. You can choose your library, however, and that will be the context of your strategic planning. Choosing to do your strategic planning for the library in which you are doing your field study makes the most sense. But if for some reason that's not going to work out for you, please let me know and I'll make other arrangements. In the real world, when beginning a strategic plan, timing and culture are both important. There are times when a school or a district is under unusual stress, and their major priority is going to overshadow your strategic efforts at program improvement. You may get into a situation that the library staff is dysfunctional, or that there are personnel problems, or that there's been a negative view of the library by faculty. Team building and changing misconceptions, building trust, those might be your first orders of business. Remember, sometimes the neediest libraries are the most rewarding to work with as long as you have a strong vision and you think that there are goals that are achievable. It's important to make a commitment, and there is background you need to build for yourself to help inspire a commitment to what good can look like. ASL provides a wealth of materials to inform and inspire your commitment to good programs. Also, if you have the opportunity to travel to other schools that have great reputations with good programs and interview the librarians, that can give you a completely new perspective. You can begin informing yourself by visiting school districts and school library websites to look at their mission statements. Ask your field experienced librarian to help you begin to collect documents that will help inform. For week 1, I want you to get familiar with our strategic planning guide. You'll find it in our course resources and also on our LibGuide. Take a look at the major tabs, and for now, just read step 1, which is planning to plan in the Massachusetts School Library Media Center Long Range Planning. Hi students, welcome to week 2 of the Strategic Planning Guide. This week we're focusing on the environmental scan of your community and school. When we begin an environmental scan, we need to identify the values or assumptions that are the guiding principles of the organization. Several factors must be considered in the initial strategic planning steps that come from external and internal analysis. External factors are social, economic, cultural, demographic, and political. Internal analysis consists of factors like staff, services, systems, and resources. You'll need to identify the kind of community in which your school is located, what the population is, what is the tax base, what are the languages spoken, the religious and ethnic makeup. You'll need to understand the context of the school library. What is the community and the school in which it's situated like? What is the culture and history? Take a trip to the Historical Society if there is one, visit the grocery store or other local businesses. Try to get a pulse on what's going on in the community. Start also collecting documentation of policies, procedures, and the curricula taught. Look at the school report card. What kind of digital presence does the library have? Observe what the working relationships of the librarian and the other faculty is. Does he or she get along with the administration? Is there other staff in the library? Are there volunteers? What contributions do they make? What is the relationship of the librarian to these staff members? What is the general feeling of the students about the library? Are they hushed all the time? Is the place dynamic, energetic, collaborative? What services are available and how are they communicated? Be on the lookout for red flags. Through observation, you'll be able to identify the red flags in the program. Keep a journal every day that you're in your field experience and record observations about the kinds of lessons, collaborations, interactions with staff and students that are happening. What do you see good that's happening, and what are you picking up on that could be improved? What gaps are there in the program? Try to be a fly on the wall and make your observations and jot them down. The bullet points on this slide provide you with the things that you need to find out for your environmental scan. You should begin to collect these materials and or making the necessary observations to inform you in order to complete assignment 1, which is your needs assessment. You'll need mission statements, goals, and objectives that should be on the district's websites. Library mission statements should be in sync with district mission statements or school mission statements. Find these statements. Begin looking at courses offered as articulated in the curriculum. What are the methods of instruction? Is instruction inquiry-based? What special programs are available? This is different than special groups. Special programs would be things like service learning or character education. Those are programs that could apply to special groups as well as the general population. Programs like Gifted or English language learning or speech and hearing are examples of programs that are designed for special groups. You need to find out the methods for assessing student learning, how progress is reported, what kinds of state and local testing takes place, what kind of grades are being assigned. Are they ABC or satisfactory? Are teachers using portfolio assessments or performance assessments? How is the school addressing state and national standards? A current issue that needs to be factored in at this time are SGOs, or student growth objectives. Is the school focused on the Common Core state assessments? How are teachers evaluated? Check out if your field school has a 5-year plan, a school development plan. Try to get your hands on their accreditation report or find out if they have any self-study analysis. Get a hold of the school vision or mission statement, goals, and objectives. If they have a strategic or an action plan, collect that as part of your documentation. You can conduct formal and informal interviews, ask to observe classroom instruction, interview the teacher afterwards if you do an observation. If you have questions on structuring interviews or observing and journaling, we can talk about that in our discussions. Listed on this slide are the readings for week 2 of the Strategic Planning Guide. Congratulations, you've now finished the section for week 2. Hi students, welcome to week 3, and this week we look at the basic elements of the library program that we'll draw on for the needs assessment that will inform our action plan. I apologize for the length of this slide. Our first order of business is to look at our current situation so that we can make an assessment of the needs that will guide our action plan. The 5 components of the school library program we'll focus attention on should be familiar to you. We're going to be looking at the learning spaces, learning space or facilities. You'll need to draw a current floor plan of the library in which you're working, and after your needs assessment, to be able to recommend changes through your use of a PowerPoint slide or some kind of drawing that illustrates both the existing and a recommended new floor plan. You'll look at staff. You'll submit job descriptions for the library staff, include regular volunteers. You may find current job descriptions at your field experience school, but if these haven't been updated for a while, you'll need to make some changes and prepare job descriptions for any new positions that you recommend. You'll look at collection. You'll need to provide a selection policy for the library. You should be able to speak with your field librarian for help in gathering the documents he or she should have handy. You'll need to describe the collection in both quantitative and qualitative terms. You can use collection mapping techniques, and in week 6 we described those techniques in more detail. You'll need to describe how the collection responds to the needs of the curriculum, the students, the teachers. You'll be able to do a collection analysis for age, strengths, and weaknesses of your collection, and then look for gaps based on the curriculum and the instructional program of the school, and then the special populations and programs that exist. For budget, you'll prepare a budget for the library based on the current budget, include recommended funding increases over your 3-year plan, and include a brief justification for the recommended increases. In terms of your instructional program, look at library scheduling. Is there a book or calendar that's kept? It might be an electronic calendar like a Google Calendar. Provide usage statistics that include the number of classes taught, the major units taught, and all subject areas that come into the library. Are some areas of the curriculum not being served? What kinds of collaborations are happening? How is the collaboration taking place? What's the mode of communication? Is some of the action virtual? How do lessons get designed? And is there an integration of information and technology skills? These 5 components of the library program must be looked at to identify positive aspects and issues relating to the program. This is done through both qualitative and quantitative analysis. The goals and objectives you will set will address the weaknesses in the program, and the action plan is what you will do to implement objectives in a 3-year sequence. The final outcome is in 2 parts. 1, the action plan is a written report, and then there's the oral component that will be a brief presentation to the Board of Education highlighting the points in your plan. There is no strategic plan until the needs assessment happens, because we need to understand the current status and the areas that need improvement. The needs assessment provides us with baseline information in order for us to be able to decide what our goals would be. How will we prioritize and set time frames, all set in the framework of bringing about program improvement. In order to structure your plan, we'll examine the elements of a library program. You'll also be referencing the National Library Standards. You're going to be looking at instruction, teaching and learning. Is there a high degree of collaboration? Not coordination or cooperation, but really true collaboration or partnership. Are students engaged in inquiry and knowledge building in addition to information literacy activities? Is the instructional program integrated with subject area curriculum or curricula? Are skills learned in the context of classroom assignments? In terms of collection development or access to information, is there a variety of reading levels and formats available through your collection? Does the collection support those parts of school curricula and state standards that are best taught through inquiry learning and resource-based learning? Is there a selection policy? Is the collection up to date? In terms of staffing and administration, is there a certified library media professional there? We're going to assume that you would not be placed in a library without one. Is there an adequate technical and clerical staff? Do the staff meet national standards? Are staff available before, after, and during school hours? Are the staff trained and retrained on a regular basis? In terms of facilities and technology, is the facility welcoming and non-threatening? I'd ask, is it enchanting? Can it sustain multiple diverse activities in terms of size and design? Is the technology adequate in terms of reliability, quantity, and currency? Is there a plan for obsolescence? In terms of budget and advocacy, is the budget adequate to support the elements of an effective library program? are budget items connected to goals and objectives that are in the strategic plan. So you're going to be looking at qualitative measures of data collection, and qualitative measures deal with descriptive details. They're a little hard to measure. Data can be observed but not measured. You can look at things when we talk about qualitative like textures, smells, colors, appearance, beauty. When we talk about quantitative measures, we're talking with numbers. We're talking with data that can be measured. So an example of what the difference between qualitative and quantitative are or is, qualitative data, say for the freshman class, you might say that the freshman class has a friendly demeanor. You might say that as a whole they're civic-minded, that they're environmentalists, that they have positive school spirit. In terms of quantitative data, as we look at the freshman class, we can say perhaps that there are 672 students, that 394 are girls and 278 are boys, that 68% of them are on the honor roll, and 150 or so of them, or 150 are in accelerated in mathematics. So that's what quantitative would look like. This slide may shed some light on what a case study is. If you're doing a case study of your field experience location, the researcher is the research instrument in a case study through which all data passes. Or actually pass, data is plural. Without objective reflection, these data become contaminated with bias. You may, for example, think that the instructional program is pretty good because it is the only the media specialist second year on the job, and there are lots of students in the library most of the time. As the objective observer, you'll be digging in deeply into the evidence, and if you listen carefully, it'll lead you to solid evidence-based conclusions as a case study. A little bit more on case studies. Your first step is choosing your case or library and your media specialist or teacher librarian. You may be guided by some questions in your own practice or experience in library or in a classroom. You may have some interest in a particular grade level or type of school. On the other hand, you might want to impose your vision of what a good media center looks like, so you do have a bias. Your second step is to establish firm research focuses by forming questions about the situation or problem to be studied and by determining a purpose for the study. Some guiding question might be, how can this library better serve the needs of its clients? Or, how can it be more effective? Or, why isn't it better and more effective? Follow the outline in your syllabus and the elements described in this guide to frame questions that will help you study the essential elements of a school library program. Those elements are its instructional program, as we said before, staffing, budget, the learning space or facility, and the collection. Your choice of data collection instruments is critical because they'll produce the evidence that leads to understanding of the case and articulating the needs of the school library. The third and fourth steps involve collecting data. Good investigators review documents looking for facts, but also read between the lines and pursue collaborative evidence elsewhere when that seems appropriate. Investigators need to be flexible in real-life situations and not feel threatened by unexpected change, disappointments, or lack of office space. Investigators must also be aware that they're going into the world of real human beings who might feel threatened or unsure of what the case study is looking like or what it will bring. In the fifth stage, the researcher analyzes and addresses the original set of research questions to see whether more data is needed. During this step, the researcher needs to remain open to new opportunities and insights. In the last step, prepare the report, being careful to protect the identity of the school unless permission is granted by the media specialist. No students' names should be used. And so as we reach the end of this section for week 3, this is these are the readings that you need to do for under Reed's needs assessment. Hi students, you're entering week 4 of the Strategic Planning Guide. This week, we'll provide you with information about Assignment 2. That's the action planning based on what you've gathered so far in your needs assessment. Your goal in Assignment 2 is to set goals and objectives to address weaknesses you've found in the program from the qualitative and quantitative data you collected in your needs assessment. The goals and objectives will be your action plan over a 3-year sequence. You will present your action plan as a report to the administrator of the school and to the Board of Education with an oral component that will be presented to the Board of Education. Your challenge for the presentation will be to point out the major points of your plan while keeping it short and sweet. No Board of Education meeting would give you more than a few minutes of their time to pitch your case, so this is a challenge. Your challenge is to boil down your 3-year action plan into a few words with graphs and charts and tables. You may choose to create an infographic or a digital story. The following slides will give you some ideas for your presentation. Mission statements and vision statements do 2 distinctly different jobs. You can click on the words to make some discoveries or watch a short video on the differences, and I'm hoping that will explain the difference between mission and vision. Briefly, mission is a brief, clear statement of why you exist. Your vision defines your purpose in terms of values and offers direction. Your vision statement should inspire you and your staff to achieve the mission. You'll also be looking at goals and objectives. And again, those are 2 different things. A goal is a broad definition, where an objective is much more specific and it identifies how you will meet the goal. You will find some materials that will be useful to you in planning beyond the SMART goal writing in the National School Library Standards. There is a part of our implementation plan with goals and objectives. However, these do not necessarily have the full SMART goals that we actually wrote in the actual plan. So these are parts of the goals and objective statements. Another thing that might be very useful to you is our school library evaluation checklist. While these are not necessarily fully realized goal statements, I think they'll give you an idea of the scope around which you can really consider writing your goals and objectives. So it might be a very good idea to just browse through that list. Pages 165 and 166 of the National School Library Standards book. You'll find that page 165 offers a clear infographic about what all the letters in SMART really mean. And you'll also find that on page 166, you'll see a very clear example of a SMART goal that you can use as a model as you build your own. And I want to suggest an alternative. First, I want you to either use the structure that I suggested, or you can experiment with creating your goal statements around the shared foundations of inquire, include, collaborate, curate, explore, and engage. That would be fine, but if you choose to do it the traditional way, please remember to tag the goals around the areas, say, of collection and advocacy with a shared foundation. So in parentheses, I would like to see your goal under a particular area of the library program, and then parentheses around the word inquire or include or collaborate. So I want you to use one of those 2 choices to incorporate the shared foundations of the national school. While we've called this a strategic plan for a while now, I also want you to think deeply about innovation. We talked about your why, we talked about innovative leadership earlier in the course. As you develop your plan, don't forget to continue thinking outside the box as if there isn't a box. Remember that. So as you develop your plan, don't be afraid to do a little dreaming. Don't be afraid to create in your library and in your school a culture of innovation. Look for inspiration outside the library, scan the world beyond your school, and look for opportunities and try to avoid the obstacles. There are many places you can go. You can go outside and look at the successful coffee shops and open workspaces, and much more conveniently, without even getting out, you can look at ALA's library future documents. Miguel Figueroa has been working on trends. You can see them expressed here and dive more deeply into any of the trends listed here when you click on the slide. Readers might begin thinking about the future creatively and productively. And here's what he responded.
So at the end of her 2016 South by Southwest EDU keynote, Jane McGonigal encouraged us to play with the future, to take on the assignment of dreaming productively and positively about the future. She had given us 4 steps. Play with the future was the 4th. The first one was to collect signals from the future. Second was to combine signals into forecasts, to start telling stories and imagine scenarios that we might encounter. And then to create personal foresight, make it really meaningful for us and the work that we do. And then to start to play with that future, start to imagine ourselves more richly combined with those signals and within those scenarios, creating positive and preferable futures for us to pursue. It's a really bold assignment to think in big ways and to articulate the most productive visions that we can, compelling visions that will motivate our communities to work with us towards positive future goals. It's also a reminder of one of the most fundamental things about futuring, that there are many futures, not just one. Until it becomes the present, there exist multiple possibilities based on how the world changes and the new signals and trends that start to take shape and move our world in new and different directions. So we're not working to predict a specific future. We're working instead to equip ourselves with the abilities, the insights to pursue multiple futures depending on where and how our world moves. It's an exercise in preparedness, not an exercise in prediction. But we can still play with that future and start to dream big and bold visions, and hopefully we can have our communities move with us towards those preferable positive futures.
So I love the idea of playing with the future, recognizing that there are multiple futures, not just one, telling our own stories about the future, and getting our communities excited about working with us about the possible futures that we can imagine. So let's keep all those things in mind as we begin to work on our plans. I'd also like you to take a look at some of the resources we've gathered on design thinking. We don't have time to do a course in design thinking. I want you to be aware of the process. And one way to get a very quick introduction is to look at the way IDEO redesigned a shopping cart, a familiar object like a familiar institution, the library. They completely rethought it, gathered some people who were willing to think deeply and think creatively, and then test and prototype and get feedback. And so take a look at that short video. And then this week, I'd like you to take a look at these readings. Remember also that our LibGuide has materials on objectives, personas, goals, of course. And also we have a design thinking playlist, which you don't need to take a deep dive into, but just be aware of some of the resources out there. And I will see you next time. This is week 5. Welcome to part 2 of our discussion of action plans. If you've been pacing yourself through this strategic planning guide and gathering important documents along the way, you should be in great shape, and congratulations for making it to week 5 of our guide. Please take a look at the examples of a needs assessment and action plans that I've posted for you on the course homepage. In your report, you might want to help define your goals and objectives through visuals. You'll probably want to do that for your oral presentation that you're going to be presenting to the Board of Education, especially because you're going to be limited in the number of words, slides, and minutes you have to present the main points of your report. This slide presents a visual of an action plan timetable with the objectives stated and when those objectives are going to be implemented over time. In this graphic, you see the vision and mission stated, and then the goals with their objectives connected to each of the 4 goals. Each objective is easily connected to the goals, both from the visual and by the numbering system that's included. Using this tree structure is another way of visualizing as well as presenting the process. You may find this template useful in capturing and recording information ideas during your strategic planning process. In fact, when I'm looking for a good form, I often go to Google Form templates or Google Doc templates to see if somebody's created an action plan that I can adapt and really customize for my own needs. Especially in usability, they represent clusters of users who behave in particular patterns and who share similar needs. They help us remember important groups of stakeholders for the purposes of defending purchases, the efforts that we put forth, and to ensure our planning focus. They really help us remember. And you'll see on the right of this slide some templates. There are so many of them out there. I'd like you to use some of those templates as you do your planning. You might even choose to use some of the stakeholders we identified with the National School Library Standards. I would probably avoid the librarians as stakeholders in this case, but you do have some choices here in terms of the others. The librarian stakeholders are Inez, Athena, Noah, and Margot, and you might identify with one of them, and your colleagues might, especially your mentor librarian might be. But in this case, you could focus on students, of course, and I want you to focus on students, but you could also focus on Tony, who is a new and possibly reluctant teacher, Leon, who's a lead learner, possibly a department chair or an administrator, a principal or assistant principal, Patty, the parent, and again, certainly the students with whom you work.
Your whole collection, your whole faculty, all of your students, the whole community, it would really have very little chance of being successful. So a focus is important, and those personas will help you focus. So consider on which learners or other learning community members would you really like to focus? Which specific impacts or interventions might you make on which specific groups? And in your plan, and possibly through your board presentation to make that impact, choose at least 2 personas and try to weave them through that narrative.
For this week, please continue reading in that Strategic Planning Guide, Step 7, and please also examine chapters 13, 14, and 15 of the National School Library Standards, particularly the material on SMART goals on pages 144 to 164 to 166, as well as the School Library Evaluation Checklist. I believe you will find it very useful in coming up with some solid goals that are based on the national standards. So we've reached the end of the Strategic Planning Guide. It's week 6. However, planning is a cyclical process. As we mentioned, it never really ends. You plan to improve, and then you continue to improve. You may remember this chart we looked at the very beginning. After you finish the plan, after you present your plan to the board or any body that is going to examine it, you get the approval, you get evaluation, and then you decide how well you've done. You look at your metrics, the ones that you established in your SMART goals, and then you continue to improve. And so this little slide talks about the approval process. Sometimes we do a very formal plan, but very often your plan is a less formal process. I would write my plan in my annual report. Sometimes I would do an infographic or a little video or a slideshow. And it would help me just make sure I wasn't in a rut and I didn't let my program go stale. It would help me ensure understanding needs and setting goals made me a better professional, a real practitioner who I could be proud of. And so I just wanted to make sure that you understood that this isn't a crazy idea, that many people do this. You'll see examples of action plans all over the web. And I'd also like you to take a look at some of the annual reports and regular reports that are posted in a variety of different formats by school librarians and other librarians around the world. I think you'll be inspired. I think it'll help push you forward. And I hope that what you create for this project doesn't just get filed, that it actually inspires action. It's an action plan. So whether or not your field experience mentor or librarian uses it, or you are absolutely able to use it in practice, I hope that it inspires some positive change. I want you also to remember that there are materials in the National School Library Standards that will support the development of a growth plan and actually, perhaps in a better way, offer you a rationale for why you should engage in planning. I wish you luck with your plans and with your presentations and your future continual growth.